So Star Wars: The Phantom Menace was released in 1999 and directed by George Lucas. And in this movie, two Jedi are tasked to save Queen Amidala as trade negotiations slip into war. On their mission, they meet a young Anakin Skywalker who may be the key to the prophecy. We recently celebrated May the 4th, Star Wars Day, of course. Everybody had a good time. So I thought, why not? Let's talk about one of the most historic and most beloved and also one of the most hated franchises of all time. This is going to be a very interesting series because they have had some of the highest of highs and some of the lowest of very lows. So it's gonna be quite a ride. So I thought instead of starting from what was released first with episode 4, why don't we start chronologically what technically happened first? So let's start with episode 1, The Phantom Menace. Well, starting off with the positives for The Phantom Menace, I think the action is definitely the best part of this movie. There's not a lot of it, I'll get to that in my negatives, but the ones that we get were a lot of fun. See, I'm in the boat where I feel like Star Wars action movies are way better when there's over-the-top campy action. I don't like the realistic sword fighting because, I mean, you're in this fantasy sci-fi world that doesn't exist, that we just want to escape and, you know, just go into this fantasy world. Let it be a little bit over-the-top. Let it be a little campy. I think Star Wars is fun when it's a bit campy, when it's a tad bit corny. I personally like that a bit. So I think when the action scenes embrace the silliness that is Star Wars, it's a lot more fun. Now look, I'm honestly being nice for this positive because the final fight, the Duel of the Fates, the score, Darth Maul, everything, that heavily carries this movie because I know it is probably, I'm going to say, either the second or third most rewatched fight in the entire franchise. So I definitely think it's the best part of the movie. So I'm going to be nice and say that the action definitely is the biggest positive. In terms of villains, Darth Maul is incredible. The look, the menace. Every time he's on screen, you think he's going to win. That's how good of a villain he is. It's unfortunate that he didn't get a lot of screen time in this movie. Now, when you look at the grand scale of things of the trilogy, this is not about Darth Maul. This really wasn't even about Darth Vader. This is more about Palpatine. I've always looked at who was the overall villain of this trilogy. It's Palpatine. It is. It's his rise to power to bring the Sith back into the forefront. Also, the double-sided lightsaber. Chef's kiss. I mean, it's so perfect. It is one of my favorite weapons ever in this entire franchise. I just hate that they spoiled it in the trailer. Can you imagine if they never spoiled that reveal in the trailer? That theater would have been loud. Every theater across the world would have been losing their minds once they saw that for the first time. But unfortunately, it was spoiled. But hey, I'm not going to take anything away from it. It still is one of my favorite moments in this entire franchise and definitely one of my favorite moments in this movie. Now, another character that I love, which I would say technically was the main character of this movie, is Qui-Gon Jinn, an amazing Jedi. You truly see his teachings, you know, passed on to Obi-Wan in the other movies. You see a lot of Qui-Gon in Obi-Wan throughout the entire franchise and animated movies and animated shows. Qui-Gon did not spend a lot of time with us, unfortunately, but he remained one of the most memorable characters, which is really saying something. I mean, Star Wars has some of the most diverse group of characters you've ever seen, some of those memorable characters, and, you know, good or bad. And the fact that Qui-Gon still is on top of a lot of people's lists of favorite Star Wars characters really is a testament to how great Liam Neeson was for that role. This may be a little controversial, but I personally liked the pod racing scene. You know, I've seen a lot of people complain about the whole pod racing thing. Now, don't get me wrong, there are aspects of the whole pod racing story that I don't like, but the actual race itself was actually really cool and really ahead of its time, so I definitely think it was one of the better parts of the movie. Now, in terms of the mixed aspect for this movie, Natalie Portman's acting was very hit or miss for me, and don't get me wrong, I know she was I think she was 16 when they filmed this, and like, she's an incredible actor, but I don't know what was going on. Like, some of the scenes when she was just Padme, like, pretending not to be the queen, her acting was really good. Like, I was like, this is great. I relate to her. She has really good facial expressions. But for some reason, when she was in queen mode, it's like she was just stone-faced the entire time, especially towards the end. When they went to the Gungans to, like, beg them for help, she was just like, I'm on my knees. I am here. No, I am begging for help. I'm like, okay, that's a little weird. Like, it doesn't seem like you're desperate for help, that you feel like your entire society is going to be destroyed. You know what I mean? So, like, I'm not going to, like, I don't want to hate on her too much. I know a lot of people definitely hate on her in the next movie, but as of now, she was definitely mixed for me. I like the character. I just feel like there were some scenes where she was doing really good, and some scenes I feel like George Lucas should have said, hey, let's try that again. And, you know, I feel terrible for Jake Lloyd. I really do. I mean, Star Wars fans, like, they pushed him to where he doesn't want to act anymore. Like, I don't even think he acted after this movie, which is terrible to say. It's not his fault. I actually liked his version of Anakin. If you have any problems with Anakin in this movie, which, you know, don't get me wrong, I kind of have some problems with him. It's not his fault. You know, it's the writing. And there were a lot of inconsistencies in the writing. Hence why, you know, people were just like, dude, George Lucas needs to stop making Star Wars movies. And then all of a sudden people want George Lucas to make Star Wars movies again. But look, I think with what he was given, he did the best with what he had. I just think writing-wise, they made Anakin very inconsistent. Like, there'll be one scene where he meets Padme, he's like super sweet to her, but he just snaps at her the next second for no reason at all. So it's very hit or miss for this character. Again, I'm not going to look down on child actors. I mean, he was super adorable in this movie, and I thought he was great, so I don't understand where the hate is coming from. And if you have any hate, it's definitely a writing thing and a directing thing. And I'm also mixed on this. I truly don't know where to stand on this because I don't really know what they were doing with this storyline. So they're very much trying to separate Palpatine and Sidious. You know what I mean? Like, they're trying to show that Darth Sidious, like, who is this mysterious Darth Sidious, you know? But then they show Palpatine, who is this trusted senator type person. But, like, it's so obvious that they're the same person. I don't know if they were trying to trick us or, like, you know, just... I really don't know what they were trying to... If they were trying to trick us, yeah, it did not work. Like, literally opening scene when we see Palpatine, I'm like, oh, yeah, it's Darth Sidious. Like, they sound... He didn't even mask his voice at all. It literally was Sidious the entire time. That's why I'm mixed on it. I feel like storyline-wise, maybe we're just looking on the outside to see him trick, you know, the Jedi into thinking he's, like, this cool senator, you know? But, like, if they were trying to trick us, it did not work. And now for the negatives. And let's just get this one out of the way. Jar Jar Binks. Now look, don't get me wrong, I am very happy that Ahmed Best got his redemption in The Mandalorian. I'm so happy for him. But I don't like Jar Jar Binks. I think he's very annoying. If they didn't have him be the reason that the Gungans helped out, there literally was no need for him in this movie. Like, it still blows my mind that for some reason Qui-Gon decided, hey, you know what? You're with me on this entire trip. Why? Even Obi-Wan was like, Master, why are we doing this? Yes, I agree, Obi-Wan. Why are we doing this? I feel bad. Again, like, I'm not putting hate towards Ahmed Best. You know, he did great with what he had. But it's just, no, I don't like Jar Jar Binks. Let's just leave it at that. But the biggest problem I have with this movie is the pacing. This is god-awful pacing. Like, let me just break down for you what happens in the first 15 minutes of The Phantom Menace. You meet Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan. They come in for a meeting to talk about, you know, about like the trade and the peace treaty and all that stuff. That doesn't even happen because Darth Sidious says, kill them now. Okay? So in the span of like 2 minutes, they literally destroy the entire ship. They have to escape. Okay? They go on separate ships and then Qui-Gon saves Jar Jar Binks and then he decides, you know what? You're coming with me on the entire trip. We need to escape. So Jar Jar's like, hey, I'll take you to the Gungans. So they go underwater to the Gungan nation and there they're supposed to go on another mission to leave. You know, because they have to alert the people of Naboo, so they take Jar Jar with them, and then they end up meeting Queen Amidala. That was all in a span of 15 minutes. That is insane to me, how you could give us that much information in the span of 15 minutes in a 2-hour film. Like, you can't do that. That's just such bad pacing. Like, I feel like they could have just spread this story out and fleshed out so much more. And, you know, to pile on top of that, yeah, let's talk about the whole pod racing story. Like, an entire third of this movie is dedicated to pod racing. Like, what are we doing? They touch down and they're like, oh crap, we don't have any tools. What are we going to do? Well, let's look around, but we have no money. So then they meet Anakin Skywalker and he's like, hey, you know, why don't we do some pod racing stuff? And then all of a sudden Qui-Gon's like, wow, you have a lot of midichlorians. I guess you're the chosen one. And so they do that. They have to make the pod racing car and then they decide to free him. So they're like, all right, we'll free him. And then they do the whole pod racing thing. Like, again, the pod racing race I like, but dude, you cannot dedicate almost half of this movie to that. You can't. When it's called The Phantom Menace, you can't just talk about pod racing. Name it something else then. I also hated that Obi-Wan was sidelined the entire time in that story arc because he literally was just on the ship with the fake queen. So I don't understand why they couldn't have him do something, you know, make him more useful, because he ended up being Oracle to Qui-Gon's Batman. He was just like, Qui-Gon would be like, hey, Obi-Wan, do this for me. He's like, okay, cool. And he like looks up all this tech stuff. He looks up all this information for him. It's like, There is a better way to utilize Obi-Wan Kenobi. We didn't even see him for most of this story arc, so why would you do that? Why would you name this movie The Phantom Menace if most of it isn't even dedicated to it? Yes, this movie came out in 1999, so yeah, the special effects are not what they are compared to today. Some scenes looked really good. You know, when I was watching the movie, I was like, oh my god, like that actually looks good, especially in today's standards. And then some scenes, oof, I wish they went back to the drawing board. Like, especially like, you know, even Jar Jar didn't look that good. Like, most of the time I was like, Jar Jar is so clearly not real. And like, all the animals that they used didn't look good. Like, when you look at the original trilogy, yes, they used CGI, but they also use a lot of practical effects. I really wish this movie and, you know, a lot of the prequels just focused on trying to use practical effects. I know it's a lot more money, but it's just going to make the movie look better and look a lot more timeless, because unfortunately when you use bad CGI, your movie is going to age like milk, and this movie kind of did. Overall, guys, The Phantom Menace I go very back and forth with. I think it's a movie I really want to love, and I think that's what happened in 1999. People really wanted to love this movie, and they did at first, but then they just really went 180 with it and called it the worst Star Wars movie ever. I think that's a little too much to say. Do I think it's a good Star Wars movie? Yes and no. Overall, I'm going to say it gets the job done, but would I really go out of my way to rewatch this movie? No. If anything, I'll just go on YouTube and watch the final fight. You know, I'll just watch Duel of the Fates on my own time, not really watching The Phantom Menace, if that makes any sense. But it's a movie that I try desperately to love, but it just very much falls short, so I'm gonna have to give The Phantom Menace a C+. I really wanted to like this movie. I wanted to go in thinking that, hey, maybe this movie is overhated. And this is the first time I watched The Phantom Menace in like maybe a decade. So I was like, let me just watch it. Let me see, you know, we're starting this franchise. I want to give it a chance. And immediately 15 minutes in, I was like, okay, I remember why people have problems with this movie. So yeah, I'm going to stick with my grade of a C+. It's still like, I mean, like, I won't complain if it's on, but it definitely is not going to be the first Star Wars movie I want to put on. Guys, thank you so much for watching this video. If you like this video, please like, share, and subscribe. I'll see you next time.